Hi, everybody. Welcome to my talk. We're going to talk about migrating an AllyTalks website, which I'll go more into here. I am Mark Casias. I work at Lullabot. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm in a band called the Random Addicts. I'm Marky on all the things that I can be on, and Drunken Drupal on Twitter if you're into still doing the Twitters. So AllyTalks is a monthly meetup website where we talk about all things accessibility. It's kind of a live broadcast. We have a guest every month, and it's really fun because it brings really good awareness to accessibility in the web space. Amy June likes talking about captions. We discuss that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, for some reason, captions aren't working on this great example that we have. If you go to AllyTalks.com, that's A11ytalks.com, we're having a session coming up next week. And that's actually the one that's on here. This is what the website looks like. Jen's going to be talking about disability studies. It's going to be a really good talk. I recommend coming to it. It's a lot of fun. They have questions and answers and everything like that. So I was brought on because we needed some maintenance to our website, and or their website, our website now. And we got a really nice Gatsby website at the beginning. It was quick, it was easy, it was done, and then Gatsby kind of went all over the place. There was nobody to maintain it. Oh, there's the team. I wanted to talk about our team. We grew from it. We used to be just Carrie, Amy June, Donna, and April, and then it's expanded to all these wonderful people on there as well. So we started out in Gatsby, and it was a really good thing for us because it was really quick, really easy. Hosting was on Netlify, so it was free. It's a very fast, very responsive site. Almost too fast because things would get cached and it would ruin it, but that's on the next slide where they're the cons. And more importantly, and most importantly, somebody already built it for us. So I was just brought on to maintain it. But as time went on, it wasn't really well supported. Gatsby the infrastructure of the Gatsby team kind of fell apart, to be honest with you. When I got the site, it was very, very outdated as far as versioning is concerned. So we had to pull up all this great stuff or pull out all this stuff because it wasn't working with the site. And then anytime anybody needed content updated, which was monthly because we have a new thing every month, Mark had to do it and wanted other people to do it. So we moved to Drupal because we all love Drupal. That's what I do for a living. It's very, very easy. Great thing about Drupal, it's easy to have other people log in and edit content. And you can refer to other content, so it's easier to work with content models. That's the beauty of Drupal. We all know that. The cons are there weren't really any. That's why we moved it. There's the migration, but outside of that, it was a really easy. It was a no-brainer for us to move to Drupal. So talk about the content model of Gatsby. We basically had three things that we had content of. We had members. The people of the organizers, basically. Pages, which are your about page and all that great stuff. And then each of the posts or each of the events was a post. And if you take a look at the pages, there weren't that many of them, the 404, the calendar, that kind of stuff. And what it was is we were using Markdown for the pages. And you had the front matter. Let me point at this thing. Pointer. Come on. Anyway, that's not how it's supposed to work, but it does. So you had the front matter where we just had the type of template it was and the title, and then it's just basically HTML inside of Markdown, which was really easy to convert. And then here's the mission and value pages, very simple. It's the title and everything like that. So it was just easy Markdown to use. We had the members, which is all the listing of people that I showed before, the people that were working on there. And this is a little more using more of the front matter, where it was their name and everything was basically in a field of its own. So the bio was even text. We didn't use any Markdown for the most part. We just used all front matter, and that's Carrie's page, and that's how it ended up looking. And then each of the posts was even worse because there were so many of them. You had the last 5 years of posts, so every time we had to add another one. And then that had a combination of the front matter where we had the tags, who was the speaker. I tried to put the speaker in in its own little object here, but I never actually got that to work in Gatsby. But it was there. I did it. And then the actual content itself was posted into in as Markdown. And then it ended up turning on like this. Basically, we had a YouTube embed, really simple. We had a tagging system in there, and everything was put together like that. And then we had different presentations of the post, whether it was the full view, which is how it looks like when you go to the site itself, but also we had a display, a draft display, or not a draft display, a teaser display that was in the front page of the website. So we had the different types that we were going to use, and so I made content types out of these. Each one of these, you have your basic page, the page, yay. The event, instead of calling it posts, I called it events. I don't know why it was called posts in the first place. Organizers, instead of members, we're organizers. We organize stuff. And then I did do the speaker content type, and then there's a web form in there, which still doesn't work because web forms don't work. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is concentrate on the organizers, how I moved that over. And basically, these are all the fields. If you took a look at that front matter that was doing before, basically had fields, the body, easy, your text, call-outs, the different types of things that they were using, an image, links, pronouns, title, yada, yada, all that's there. And that, if you look at the front matter, was basically what it is. You had your template, which was member, which now we have the content type of member. Whether or not it's draft or not, that's a different thing. Whether or not they're actually currently being used, and that's published or unpublished, that's very easy. And then their name, title, all that great stuff, where the image is in there. And then we have these components, which basically were the React components, which was the meat of this talk, where you're building all these things out into HTML using React components. And the Gatsby components for that, we used the member bio was the component itself that we converted to use for the organizer content type. So then I moved them into single directory components. So here in the Drupal theme, you have your components folder, which is what you need to do. And then you can, inside your components folder, you have all the different folders that's going on. And in this one, I have a content main folder where I put all my content components into. And then I even drilled down further into events. And actually, I meant to do that for the bios. But so we had member bio. Here's what the component looks like in Gatsby. You have a JavaScript file and then your SAS file. Excuse me. And that's what loaded in there. But in the Drupal theme, you have your organizers, and then you have your teaser based on the component file, the component.yaml, CSS, which is the styling of it. And then the twig. The beauty of the CSS inside the component is the fact that you can lock it into the component directly, so there's no leakage. In the Gatsby theme, the CSS ended up being one big splash CSS file, but with the components, it's locked into your theme, into your component itself, and it's only loaded when that component is being used or being rendered, which makes it so you don't have to have a ton of libraries or a ton of a big old CSS file. Here is what the component file looks like, the component.yaml file. It is a schema. It's basically a YAML file. You give it the name of it, organizer, which is, I can show you why I did that later. What the group is, you can group it into whether it's your theme or actually if you're using something called the style guide, you can actually group it like it's in a style guide. And then it has the different properties of the different fields that you're going to pass into it. So you have your field pronouns, your field title, your label, all those different things. And then slots, if you're using blocks in Twig, you have those are known as slots in the component itself. Here's the JSX file, here, the React component itself. You'll notice that we're pulling in all this stuff. We're importing link from Gatsby. We're importing the entire React library into this file. And then we're pulling in the CSS file as well. And then we're just returning a simple HTML into there where we're adding an image and then the name. This is a teaser, so it's really, really easy. And then we're exporting it as a default. The twig file itself is you have a div, and then you add the attributes file in there. And you can add a class or you can not add a class. Actually, I've taken out that class since, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Then we have a block, which is our slot where we put in the image file, which is easier to work when you're working with media, to use a block and then put it in that way instead of trying to pass it to the component. And then I'm passing just the label and the URL in there. The SAS file, where I'm importing all the stuff that's not being used because it's already in somewhere else, but in order to build it out with that, you had to import that all in there. The only thing that made it useful was the fact that you're importing the variables in there, but there's the breakpoint medium as opposed to just defining your breakpoint. With the CSS, I'm using this thing called data component ID, and then the name of the actual component, and that actually breaks it in there. And I'll show what the output. Actually, I'm going to do that now. If I go into the site itself. And I go to About. And here's the member teaser. Oh, actually, I wanted to do that. Sorry. About. Live demos. You'll notice that in this speaker one, if you inspect it, it actually has... You end up getting this great thing when you're doing the component. There are a couple of things that the components do. One, it shows you if you have your twig debug turned on. You have to have it turned on, obviously. That's why I decided to do that instead of the live site. It tells you what component you're actually using in there. And if you're using a component inside a component, it actually breaks it down for you. So coming up here, we have the image component later. Two, it adds this component ID of AllyTalks organizer teaser, which defines the component that you're using, so that in your CSS, right here, you can actually capture that in the whole thing. So anything that has that component data ID will limit the CSS to that, so you can actually really couple your CSS with your components, which is why I like doing that. And then it's very simple. I added, instead of using variables, which actually converted that to a variable for color, and then the different image media displays, I'll put that in there, but I wanted to an easy copy and paste for the display here. And then all you have to do, once you get all that done, in your node, your template file, you have your node organizers. You have your content type, which is node. You have your organizers, which is the content type itself. And then the fact that it's the teaser display. And all you do in there is actually embed your component into there using a block so that you can pass in the content field media, and then it takes all that information in there from your template file straight into your component and then displays it like that, because that's the component I chose to use. And that's really simple to do, and then you pull them the full output, which is what we did with this guy, where we have each of these components out there with their own kind of thing, so you can actually take a look at each of the divs on there. It's a view, so of course we have a view div, and then each of these components hops in there for Andy and April and all the different ones. Very, very simple. And then to go into the full bio of that, it's the exact same stuff, and you're using the component from before, and then you can go back to about and whatnot. What's this? Sorry, this is editorially. I don't know if you've ever heard of editorially. It's a really great module that defines if there's an issue with your accessibility on your site. It's actually for the content providers, which will help add there. And apparently there are issues for links that I did not do. But it's really great because it actually shows you that information on there. Hey, cool soda. But yeah, editorially is the module that's used there.
A Drupal module?
It is a Drupal module, yeah. I gave a talk last year about it. It's really cool. So yeah, there's the output of everything that's going on there. We have past volunteers and then the page itself. Really quickly looking at the site itself. We had, this is outdated content. That's probably why I had the other one. But here it's actually going to talk about the editorially module with John, the creator of the module itself. And each one of these is listed in as its own content. Yes, that's the word I'm using. And then if you take a look at the file structure here, can everybody see that okay? I know I use the dark mode, but it works really easy. Basically, again, you have your different content types. You have atoms. You can still use atomic design on this. This color, I'll show you the reason that I actually created this component. There's really no reason for it other than for the style guide reasons. But then all the CSS that's put in there, if you take a look at your library's YAML file, the only really thing I'm doing is I'm calling a couple of variables CSS and some basic element CSS, but everything else is inside the component. So when I want to change it, I just have to change a single CSS file instead of having to go through a whole build process. That being said, I want to actually start using PostCSS on this. I just haven't gotten around to it to do things like media queries and whatnot. PostCSS does it a little bit better, but you don't have to use a full SAS build on the thing, which is a kind of a pain. The other thing I did in there, and actually is that the next part of the slideshow, I want to talk about some of the helper modules that I'm using for the site as well. The first one is called No Markup. It's really, really cool because basically you know that when you get a field and you put it in a Drupal field and you get a div inside of a div inside of a div, No Markup actually gives you the ability to not do that, where you're just passing the actual content of the string into it, which is great if you're using something like a component and you're trying to pass a variable in there. You're not adding markup, which sometimes gets rendered as not markup. It actually gets rendered as plain text. So you have to be careful with that. Go to No Markup and it will actually take it out for you. And then you can actually just use the content variable that's passed in all your templates already and just pass them straight through it into there. I usually embed my markup, the content field, into my things just because it's already there. Why pass it again? Storybook module. Everybody loves Storybook. Everybody loves having the Storybook, and I'm going to show you the style guide, the Storybook style guide that we created here. And this is the colors component that I added on there, just because I wanted to show the base colors. If you have a good style guide, it's going to show you your base colors, what colors you're going to be using, and what they're defined as, some icons and whatnot. And each of the teasers is its own kind of thing. The beauty of the Storybook module is that it's all Twig. You're not trying to render Twig through JavaScript. It's actually using the Drupal template engine to render the stories. That's good and it's bad. It's good because you're using native Twig like it's supposed to be used. It's bad because you have to actually have a connection to your Drupal site in order for it to work because it uses the server methodology. So if your Drupal site goes down for some reason, your Twig is going to go down as well. The stories themselves are even written in Twigs, and then compiled into a JSON file. But this is really all. It's like you're writing your own template file through a story, which makes your life a lot easier when you're writing your stories, instead of trying to write another JSX file that outputs Twig that outputs a JSX file. It's very, very not fun. But that's actually one of the main complaints about this version of Storybook, is the fact that it's not a standalone version of Storybook. It actually has to have, if you notice the website here, it's actually on my DDev site, or if I have it on running on the live site, I need it running on the live site. Very cool. But it works. but not as good as the single directory component style guide, which this just released last week, and I already got it up and running on my Drupal here. Huh? I don't know his name. He does one weird thing that he does that I've been meaning to talk to him about. He actually commits directly to the main branch anytime that there's an issue. He doesn't use an issue branch or anything like that. Drives me crazy. Anyway, but again, I've only been working with it for about a week now. So this is actually a very its own style guide. It's in Drupal again. You can't style this sidebar here, which is kind of sad because I can't read that text, basically. So you can't change what the style is. The good thing about Storybook is Storybook actually takes your Drupal theme into consideration, the whole thing, while this one actually has its own little base CSS thing going on, which we need to, another thing that needs to be addressed. But you can actually add these little demos. So first off, this thing actually will give you the properties, so you can actually say, hey, we're at 2024, and then submit it, and then it actually shows you the thing. If you're having a teaser event, it gives you the ability to fill in the slot and everything like that, and then build it. And then also it has a drush command that builds a YAML file, or a demo YAML file. Let me see if I have one here. Which one? Oh. This demo base colors file, which actually fills out another YAML file for you, which defines things for you, so you can just click on like the straight base colors, and it actually shows you without having to fill in everything what the properties. So you can actually see what the default things are looking like out of the box, which is really, really nice. It has its own issues, like if you fill out that form and you type in submit, you can't change it and then type it submit again. That's actually a Drupal core issue for some reason. But this is just a brand new release, and he's really working hard to make it more user friendly for everybody. But I do like it, and then you can get a media image, and then you get breaks, things like that. One thing about that, the component file, if you ever look at the raw component YAML file, like the main one, it says that everything in there is optional, but the fact is it's not. You definitely want to have a name and then a group, and actually you even want, in your content, you want there to be your props and your slots to be defined. There is another thing called UI patterns that's coming out that relies heavily on the properties inside the component.yaml file. So while as of 2 weeks ago, the component.yaml file was just there, it was completely empty. Now I actually have to use it to work with the pattern lab style, or the UI style guide, and the style guide that's SDC style guide that's there as well. You'll run into issues with UI. Actually, with the UI patterns, right now, all my components, if I enable the module, it breaks the entire site, which is not fun. But fortunately, it's on my local, so it doesn't work on my local. Is a good thing. And I think that's everything that I have to talk about. I think. Yes, that was my last slide. I didn't have an outro slide. Any questions? Yes?
I'm not sure I heard you correctly, but when you moved the components into Drupal, you converted from Sass to CSS.
Uh-huh.
If you didn't want to do that, if you wanted to keep it in Sass, is there anything automated, or do you just have to come up with your own way to do it?
You'd have to build it yourself,
Yeah.
like a GOAT file or a Webpack or whatever you wanted to do. It just was easier for me just to and really half of it was renaming the CSS file or Sass file to CSS, and then removing the variables.
Yeah.
And then if in the main CSS folder here, I have a variables where I'm actually defining variables in there for the font face and for the colors and everything like that. So I'm using actual CSS variables instead of Sass variables.
So you didn't even need Sass anymore.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Since CSS has it really great, it actually does the code folding where you can select inside of a selector. What's that called? Yes, thank you. Nesting. CSS does that to a point. I mean, don't rely on it heavily. Well, one of my favorite talks was at Chicago camp. A guy was talking about all these great CSS things, use CSS, and after every single one, he said, "Yeah, but don't do it," because it's still experimental in a lot of ways. But yeah, but CSS variables supported across the board, works very well, except for media queries. You can't use a variable in a media query unless you're using PostCSS, where that's actually why I want to actually add PostCSS to it. So, yeah. So that's all. You had a question?
Yeah, more hypothetical about performance, because you mentioned that you can create separate CSS, so it's not loaded on each page, but that means that the new CSS file has to be generated on each page and not cached. I don't know if it's just the benefit of just compiling everything to one CSS file and letting the browser cache it versus generating separate CSS on various pages.
Yes, I agree. But also with Drupal caching, the way that it works is it will render the page, figure out which components it needs, and then render and cache that CSS file on that page. So once it's loaded, it's cached. So if you're looking at the same component over and over again, it's going to be already cached in your CSS. It does build the single large CSS file, when you don't have your CSS development mode on. And it does do that caching. I understand that, if you have a super, like 100 different components going on at the same time, that could possibly do a performance hit, but I have not seen one. But there's certainly something to be concerned about. Is there anybody else? Yes?
In your example, you hard-coded an image into one of the files?
The reason I did that, actually, thanks for noticing that. I meant to bring that up. The reason I did that is for Storybook, because Storybook needs an image in there for it to see, where I didn't want to have to pass that in through the story itself. But since it's in a block and in the template file, if you go to the template file, you're using the block itself. Stories, templates, content, organizer, teaser. So in the actual in the actual Drupal, I'm replacing that block that's hard coded with whatever I'm passing through the template. If I took out that block, every single CSS or every time that component rendered, it would show the same image over and over again. But since I'm using the slots or blocks, slots, same word. I don't know why they couldn't just use the same word, but okay. Since I'm using that slot, that actually renders through the twig rendering engine. So the CSS in the teaser twig, or this image that's in there, is just there so I can throw a story in there without having to pass an image each time. So,
adding to that, I'm trying to wrap my head with the model. What's the series of files you need for the React component? What's the order of operations? Do you build?
So in the React one, you had. Do I have that open?
Because you built the content types and the fields, right? And then how does that make its way all the way to the React component?
It doesn't. No. I'm replacing React with the single directory components. The React site's gone away. Gatsby.
React's gone.
Yeah. We said thank you for your service and told them to go.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. So the way that it would pass if you've done, because I've done progressive decoupling as well. I used to be really heavy into decoupled Drupal, and now I'm kind of, this pendulum's going the other way. You could actually pass those into as variables through JavaScript, and that's how in your template file it would pass the variables through to your JSX file, which would then render it, which is why it's actually slower, because now you're going through 3 different rendering engines, on top of that. So. Any other questions, comments? This was only a half hour, right? Oh, good. Yes.
I just like to make a comment. You kind of already reiterated that you're going to go to post CSS, but just for the room, I made that switch about a year and a half ago, and haven't touched SAS since. So you can pretty much do everything you can do in SAS with those plugins.
Yeah. I think the SAS, Gulp, all that stuff is you have to learn the things to get around it to make it work more than you have to actually work with the code, which is why it's frustrating, which is why post CSS is easy, because it just loads right away. So, all right. Yes.
So I actually was not actually being familiar at all with the single directory components, and I was kind of get a little more information about what it was and how it fit in. I was particularly curious because of the React components switched to that, which we're referring to as decoupling, and so the I would actually view it as React, but that made me wonder, there's something here that I'm missing with that's useful for our decoupling. Can you talk a little bit about how it fits in with the concept of spec with decoupling, if at all?
So it doesn't. Single directory components is definitely going full Drupal. That is one of the problems that a lot of people, with the storybook in general, people are like, well, you made a storybook, how do I use this storybook with my React components or with my React version of the site? Well, you don't. This is for Drupal. So if you're looking for a decoupled solution, which, there are a lot of great solutions, Vue, Vue.js, Next.js, all those things. You definitely want to stick to your React. You build it for the React world and then have Drupal pull it in, would be the way to do that. But then you'd be writing your JSX file and then a twig file to pull that in and then a template file. And again, now you're up to multiple rendering engines. Or you just render it in a block and call it a day. Yes?
You said progressive decoupling is kind of swinging back. It's moving away and going back to Google.
My personal. I actually am an organizer of decouple days in New York. We took this year off. We're going to be in New York next year. If you want to go to a great conference in New York, decouple days sometime soon. I don't know. We haven't figured out where we're going to be. But I did a lot of decoupled work with previous employers, and it's cool. But now I'm liking the way that Drupal renders stuff. It's a lot cleaner. The content model, since we have a nice content model, why aren't we just using it? To me, everybody complains about Drupal's front end being difficult. This makes it easier, and I never actually saw the difficulty in that. But that's my personal pendulum is swinging away to do the full Drupal instead of the progressive decoupling. Because you can still use Drupal to pull in API stuff and then render it in a twig template as well. So, if you need be. And scene. Thank you very much.